Determining the top 50 best-selling books of all time is a difficult task, as it is challenging to accurately track book sales throughout history. However, based on various sources and estimates, here is a list of the top some best-selling books of all time. 1. The Bible. 6 billion copies sold. 2. Quotations from Chairman Mao Tse-tung. 900 million copies sold. 3. Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. 500 million copies sold. 4. The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. 150 million copies sold. 5. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. 150 million copies sold. 6. The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. 80 million copies sold. 7. Twilight series by Stephenie Meyer. 120 million copies sold. 8. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. 50 million copies sold. 9. Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. 30 million copies sold. 10. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. 70 million copies sold. 11. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. 65 million copies sold. 12. The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. 60 million copies sold. 13. The Diary of Anne Frank by Anne Frank. 30 million copies sold. 14. The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. 30 million copies sold. 15. The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. 85 million copies sold. 16. The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. 140 million copies sold. 17. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. 15 million copies sold. 18. The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. 50 million copies sold. 19. The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. 100 million copies sold. 20. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. 50 million copies sold. 21. The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. 10 million copies sold. 22. The Bridges of Madison County by Robert James Waller. 60 million copies sold. 23. The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. 20 million copies sold. 24. Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. 45 million copies sold. 25. Watership Down by Richard Adams. 50 million copies sold. 26. The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. 25 million copies sold. 27. The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss. 15 million copies sold. 28. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. 10 million copies sold. 29. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. 30 million copies sold. 30. The Shack by William P. Young. 20 million copies sold. 31. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. 20 million copies sold. 32. The Adventures of Tintin by Hergé. 200 million copies sold. 33. The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. 20 million copies sold. 34. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. 80 million copies sold. 35. The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. 31 million copies sold. 36. The Help by Catherine Stockett. 10 million copies sold. 37. The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. 20 million copies sold. 38. The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. 14 million copies sold. 39. The Daughters of Cain by Colin Dexter. 10 million copies sold. 40. The Hunger Games series by Suzanne Collins. 100 million copies sold. 41. The Stand by Stephen King. 4 million copies sold. 42. The Thorn Birds by Colleen McCullough. 33 million copies sold. 43. The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. 27 million copies sold.